We are live, folks, on What Do You Think on a Tuesday night. It is Tuesday, isn't it? We are at Tuesday night. Um, I'm just chatting with some friends tonight, some really good mates, and I think we've spoken about a lot of the stuff we want to talk about already, so we're going to go over it again. But I'm joined tonight by the amazing Mr. Tuffy, down there below, and a mate we met back in the 80s when he was he spent his time coming up from Brisbane. Coming up from Sydney to join us all here in our little town of Brisbane, Mr. Glenn Bidmead. G'day, Glenn. How are you, mate?
Hey guys, how you going?
I'm good. How did you two guys meet?
I met.
You go, Glenn.
Okay, I reckon the first time I met Tuffy was I was doing a gig at the Metropole or the Metropolitan or whatever it was.
Yeah.
In the city, and you'd just done a lunchtime gig. And I was setting up to do a one after you in the Arvo. But I thought it was funny because Tuffy was walking around to all the tables singing to people. And I thought...
Acoustically. Cool. Without no PA, nothing, just like a busker.
I thought, okay, that's sort of good. And then I used to see you at the port office because I used to play before you on Friday Arvos.
Yeah.
For a little while. And you used to play after me. You used to do the evenings, obviously. And and then I saw you, things like the Transcontinental, and then we got to chatting and got to doing some recording. I remember I went to your place once over at Algester years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think the first time I met you was at that gig at the Metropolitan, or what was it called, the Metropole?
The Metropolitan, I think it was. Yeah, I don't think it's even there now.
Yeah,
part of the My Centre, wasn't it?
Yeah, I came up in '88, and I probably started doing gigs in halfway through that year.
Yes, I come in '88 as well.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you saying you came up from Melbourne, so we came up at the same time, and I was living out at Carralee, out near Ipswich way.
Oh yeah.
And then I remember the first few gigs I used to do were at the actually, the first gig I ever did was the Full Moon? It used to be called the Osborne.
Yeah, me and Nik playing there.
The Osborne.
Yeah, that was the first gig I ever did in Brisbane.
Mate, it's a different venue now from the old Osborne.
I know. I played there last year. I was up in Brisbane for a month and played the Full Moon with my mate Alex. Yeah.
Well, the guys from the port office owned it at the time, so I did that as well.
Right.
It was rough as bags back in those days.
Oh yeah, it was a bit of a dump. And I remember I went up to the bar to get a drink, and because I'm from Sydney, right? Because you guys call them pots.
Yeah.
And I went up to get a beer. And I said, "Can I have a beer?" And he said, "Do you want a pot, mate?" And I went, "What?" I thought he was trying to sell me drugs.
So you bought the drugs?
Yeah, I said, "No, I have to go."
Yeah, forget the beer. Just give me the pot.
So that was sort of, okay, it's a pot. I said, "Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Just give us a red wine."
Mate,
that was the first gig I did.
Yeah,
we let you.
Just a little while on the Metropolitan, mate. I used to get the bus in from Algester, go with the guitar on the bus, go in there, do the gig, and get the guitar, jump back on the bus, and get the bus home.
That's
classic.
Funny.
Oh yeah. Well, that was one of my first gigs.
Yeah.
Busking. Yeah.
Did you ever do the Flying Nun?
I did. Yeah.
Yep.
I did same year. Yeah, same year. Yeah.
I remember Greg Shaw put me in there. That old church, yeah.
Yeah. That was a great little gig.
Yeah.
That was really crazy. But no, like that was in Sydney and Melbourne would have gone off. But it was just, it's like so close to the city and stuff. But I'm just going, I can't believe.
Yeah.
St Paul's Tavern. Yeah, St Paul's Terrace, or Leichhardt Street by the time you get up to there, Yeah, geez, we were in there virtually in the same camp. Just follow each other around.
Back in more the mid '80s, remember Bonaparte's up the top of St Paul's Terrace there?
Yeah.
Bonaparte. It used to have this gig.
Too, didn't it?
It had this underground gig more or less. So it was under the building. It was a band gig, a full band gig, and the room would just chock out. And it was one of those gigs where the bar at the back of the room was just like these trestle tables with eskies on it. And we would we'd squash on stage. And it was like one of those ones where the air conditioning would just be coming down on you with water, just leaking water on you everywhere as you're trying to sing. But it was so hot and sweaty and grotty, and it was such a good gig. It was just so much fun. Everyone was just packed in there. The energy was just so good. And there's a whole generation that hasn't seen that, where you got 150 people packed in a small space, the band's playing really loud, you got sweat just dripping off you because not only is the air conditioning coming down on you, the lights back then used to be hot. They weren't these lights they use now. You actually you did the sauna on stage, and you lost like so many pounds each gig. But it was just an amazing vibe because the energy was shared by everybody in the room. That was, to me, that was like the heyday of my band playing, was in rooms like that where you just, the audience were there, they were in your face, you were really loud in their face, and everyone just shared the energy. It was so good.
It's like the old Normanby, that little front bar of the old Normanby. You probably have to get about 80 to 100 people in the joint that just pack out. So did you do the crest as well, then? Did you just make it a crest? That was part of the...
No, you know what I did? I did the little bar next to the crest, the little restaurant bar. And I remember one night you were playing there with Keith, and I was talking to you before my gig, and I never went in and saw your gig, but because I was playing the little... There's like a little restaurant next to it.
Yeah, I know. That was like a piano
like an
bar,
Indian sort of restaurant, but I never did the main room of the crest, but yeah. And I did...
Was it talking about smoky and sweaty?
Was there something Jackson's one of the room there at that time?
Yeah, General Jackson's was down there.
That's right. And Tuffy's, not Tuffy, I'm sorry, mate. Rusty used to play down there all the time, didn't he?
That's right. He's doing that on TV for it, apparently.
Yes, the TV, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Hey, Glenn, mate, we're here to talk to you. We've got a lot of memories to share, but mate, what's your story, mate? Tell us your story? Came into this game. Yeah. All right. How'd you avoid arrest?
No, I just I grew up in Sydney. That's a good noise.
That's a good noise, Tuff. Don't know what you're doing there, but
keep
the headphones is playing up. It's dropped off volume.
Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in Sydney, and
good.
And had bands in the early 80s. I was playing with my brother, who was a drummer and singer, in bands when I was like 14, and he's 2 years younger, so he was 12. Little kids bands, and started doing it professionally when I was about 20, and had bands through the 80s in Sydney. We played 5-6 nights a week, all the sort of venues and stuff, just original bands when you used to play originals, and people would come and see you.
What type of areas? Is that like Balmain, or were you suburbs, or where were you?
No, big places like... Just tell them to keep that down, will you?
Yeah.
Hang on. Is that the Valley vibe, Tuffy?
Yeah, it's like in New York. Yeah. Like in New York, so every 5 minutes in New York.
So no, we were doing venues like Selena's at Coogee Bay.
That Coogee Bay Tavern?
Sorry? Yeah, Coogee Bay
Hotel.
Coogee Bay? Yep.
Yeah. That was a big one, wasn't it?
Yeah. The Mona Vale Hotel, the Manly Vale, the Brighton Hotel, they're all run by this mob called Millers.
Yeah, right.
A chain of pubs.
Sheila's at North Sydney, was that one? Sheila's?
Yeah, I did that. That was owned by Kevin Jacobson and Cole Joy owned that place.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, Berry Street, North Sydney. Used to do Sheila's a bit.
We toured down through there.
And just pubs. And I mean, in those days, there was a pub in every suburb that had bands most nights of the week. Yeah. So you could work 5-6 nights a week and make okay money, like, $800 to $900 for a band in those days. And we did that 5 or 6 nights a week. And we had a guy who did the lights and a guy who did the sound. And we owned a little transit van we bought. Yeah. And my brother and I were the roadies. But you could do that when you're 20. And so we did all those gigs. And then out of the blue in about 1986, 87, this guy called me from Brisbane called Glenn Murphy, who I think you said you might have heard of his name, Nick.
I've tried to face the name. Do you remember?
He was based in Story, wasn't he? Yeah, he did. Right there. Is that better?
So he rang me out of the blue and said, I've heard some of your demos. I don't know where he heard them from. And I think actually Harry Bruce, the bass player, might have given him some, who played with me in the early 80s. And Harry's played with, Renee Gayer, Aussie Crawl, and he's still playing now. He's 73 or 75 or something. And so he said, this is great. If you come up to Brisbane, I can get you a record deal and get you lots of gigs and this and that. And I went, all right. So just packed up and moved to Brisbane in 1988 and went up there with my brother who was playing drums, my brother Paul, and a guy from Sydney, a guitarist called Steve Vizeschi, and I'd love to know where he's got to. And he was a great guitarist, but he was going to play bass in our band. And we had a 3-piece band, and I think the first gig we did was at the Roxy in the Valley.
Yeah.
Oh, nice,
And we did like the Mansfield Tavern, and we did Mooloolaba Hotel or the Powerhouse or whatever it's called. We did about 5 or 6 gigs, and then the gig stopped, and then my brother went back to Sydney. And Steve disappeared. I think he ended up going back in the end, and I stayed there for 10 years. So,
mate, to straighten out in your memory, I think the Powerhouse would have been in Toowoomba, and Mooloolaba Hotel was Tomo's back then.
Tomo's, that was it. Tomo's, yeah.
Tomo's, yeah.
So that was the first band gig we did, and then that was the very first solo gig I ended up doing on Sunday arvos at Tomo's. And I used to drive from Karalee to Mooloolaba. I'd leave at 10 in the morning, get there at 12 or 1 or something, set up, do my gig until 4, pack up and get home at 10 at night. And I did that every Sunday for about 6 months.
Yeah. But back in those days,
for $125.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was not uncommon back then for me to be doing 10 gigs a week. You do this one every day, and then you do 2 on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the gigs were just there all the time. And it was great training for your voice, for surviving, for knowing how to work every type of crowd. And I can't remember the exact dollars, but I knew back then I was earning more than my friends who were doctors and lawyers by doing gigs. It was like the work was there, and we were playing all the time. And we were talking a bit before too about Hutcho, when he had his agency down the coast. Before I was doing the solo work, I really came out of school and end up on the circuit. And Hutcho had set up a thing up here in Queensland where you guys are doing things locally in Sydney. Up here, we'd go from like Cairns to Townsville, Gladstone, Mackay, the whole thing all the time. And we'd play 6 or 7 nights in each town. And you'd always have like an 8 to 10 ton truck. You had a 3-man crew. You were playing in rooms that held 1,800 people. And you'd play 5 nights of the week. And then on the Friday night, you had to pull your system down because Icehouse were coming through or Dragon were coming through. And you'd support those bands that were coming through. And the education we got up here was just, the training was just so good from the circuit he had set up in those days. On the back of that, Shuri came into the scene and was doing a lot of bookings around the state as well. But we had agents back then who were making their money by actually promoting the bands and putting working conditions in place that made it worthwhile for the bands. That all changed severely when
89, I reckon.
Well, the Pokies came in, and then you had like all the hotel chains come in, and the agents then started working for the hotel chains. They didn't work for the artists anymore. Mate, did the same thing happen in Sydney, or was it just a thing up here?
I don't know. When I first started doing gigs in Sydney, when I started doing solo gigs, I was through an agency called The Agency. Before that, they were called Cordon Bleu. And I remember that. They're a pretty big agency, booked a lot of big bands, but I just did solo gigs in little pubs and wine bars and restaurants and stuff. As far as them working for the venues, I'm not sure. I think there was a lot of those big clubs used to have bookers that would do. Well, I booked this venue, but they weren't necessarily agents. They were just some guy that, And I remember years later when I was signed to John Woodruff, he started a company in Sydney called Dirty Pool in the 70s. That basically he discovered the Angels in Adelaide, and they'd be playing at Maroubra Seals Club, which holds 2,000 people, but they'd be getting $2,000. And then
John became a big publisher, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he signed Savage Garden and
that stuff.
Hit the big time. So he sort of basically...
He signed you at about the same time, didn't he? He signed you did a single with him, didn't you?
I did an album and that never got released. He signed me in 1998. So it was a couple of years after Savage Garden, And
I remember that.
So that's why I went back to Sydney to make the record. And
I remember,
Yeah, so... And then he got sick. He got Bell's palsy, then he got bowel cancer, and he sort of retired. And he's fine now. He's okay. But that sort of was the end of my record career because he retired, and I didn't have anybody sort of actively pushing the record or trying to get it released.
And you need that, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I did a similar thing around 96, 97, where some guys, Mick Flanders and that, had signed up a label. I started a label here called Arctic, and they were working with John in some way. I'm sure around the thing, but they got signed as they became a sub label for BMG. Then and we had a great album out that Dave Wilson, who was the music director at Triple M at the time, made a comment that my album was the most Triple M album of the year. But then Arctic went broke, and so as an artist, you go with where the ship leans. It's like you think you're on your career path, but then if you haven't got the label working with you, the publicist and the management, all these things working around you, the ship just tilts one way or another, and you're never actually able to stay on that course.
That's what happened. I mean, I got signed off this stuff I did in Brisbane, which was sort of psychedelic rock, and it went under the name of Lemon Juice, and
really psychedelic.
Oh, I love that. I love that album. I love that album.
So we actually released it through Ocean Records, which was the mob that Darren Clark and Murray Lyons, Gary Smith, Bill Blake, David Richards, and Robert Clark put together out of Sweet 16. And we released this record through them to Japan, which I recorded in my house at Kenmore with my mate Steve Glover. And then we sort of sent it down to Sydney to try and shop the labels, and then every label wanted to sign it, which is great. So I went down to Sydney, and they were all the labels offered us deals, but I said, well, we should talk to John Woodruff because he's just had Savage Garden. They sold 8 bazillion records. So, but he said, no, I'm busy. I've got no time to listen to anything. And then a friend of ours, Paul, what's his name? Bass player from Mondo Rock, Paul Christie. He said, I'll get on to John. He's a mate of mine. And he rang up John and said, you've got to listen to this stuff. And he listened to it, and then straight away rang up and said, great, I want to see Glenn. And I was down in Sydney, and I said, my manager at the time said I was in Sydney. And he said, no, tell him to go back to Brisbane. I'll be up tomorrow. And it's like, I guess he wanted to see how bad I wanted it. So I jumped in the car and drove back to Brisbane. And he was up there the next morning at David Richards' place, one of my managers, and at Grange. And then he just turned up, and we had a 10-minute meeting. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to make records and write songs. He said, okay, done. That was it. He didn't want to see me play. He just said, I love these songs. We did a deal. I made a record with Charles Fisher producing, but we didn't record that Lemon Juice stuff. That was the first thing.
Lemon Juice was awesome. That was an awesome album.
I know.
That was awesome. I absolutely love that album.
And what happened was Charles said, well, this is already produced. What do you want me to do? And I said, well, let's just re-record it and you make it sound great. And he said, I don't want to do that. So he told John that, and John said, I'll just do what Charles said. And I should have said, well, no, let's do what we originally were going to do. But anyway, I didn't. We ended up making this singer-songwriter record, which is a good record, but when Roadshow heard it, who we licensed the record to, they sort of went, this is not what we signed. And so they weren't into it, and they released 2 singles, and then they dropped me. And then John got sick, and then he was going to get another deal, and then it never happened. And then there you go. So we've spent $50,000 making this record that never got released.
Putting that into tough. Just putting that into perspective for people listening. Charles Fisher produced Savage Garden.
Yep,
and
he
made them
lots of people's debut albums, and he's had a lot of success with first albums for people.
So in Glenn's position, you would think you've got all the ducks lined up. Yeah, but just need some of these things to shift one way or another. Yeah.
And so
I saw the story when we were in Los Angeles. I saw that story numerous times where we're working in Cherokee Studios, which is a major studio complex in LA. And a few of the bands that came through, they were just absolutely amazing. To me, they were like Steely Dan's of the 90s. They were amazing. Yeah. But because one thing or another went wrong with the label, these albums, which they'd put, $300,000-$400,000 into and produced by people who produced Boss Skaggs and all these other stuff, because then it went to the East Coast and the person in the label high up had some personal issue going on, they would drop the act. And so many artists just every bit as talented as like the really big stars, the things have fallen over just because the business or some personal thing in the label or whatever else just didn't fall the right way. And I think it's a common story that I've had the same thing with I won't go into my story because we're here to talk about you, but I've had the same thing happen a couple of times in my life where if things had just gone slightly the other way, it would be a different story how the careers ended up. But here we are. We're still playing music and we love it. So I'm not going to be negative about all that. But, mate, please keep Tuffy. Sorry to interrupt you, mate. You were going to say something before.
No. I'll do this for both of you. Glenn, is Lemon Juice still available on through Spotify or anything like that?
It is.
Because people are going to
hold that up again.
People are going to hear it. People are going to hear it.
Oh, so that's the album. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on all the streaming things. I re-recorded it. That's not the first version we did. The first version was up in Brisbane, but basically
that's what I heard.
Yeah, basically most of those songs are on this, and I just re-recorded it, so I owned it, and released it. And we actually had to put a band together did a few gigs, but it's just so expensive to pay players and play in rooms where you're not covering your costs. And there was a great band, but it was just, So that's still available. But so for
the listeners and the viewers out there, what they look for if they go to Spotify to get that?
I put the banner up there for Glenn's website. Is that right, Glenn?
Yep, and you can also get that record from my Bandcamp site, which is, you've got a Bandcamp site, Nick, too, haven't you?
Yep.
So
God bless Bandcamp.
Look up Lemon Juice, or look up the title of the album, which is called The Sound of Strawberry. So
Sound of Strawberry. That's Lemon Juice. And what about and you've got the Gordons? What about
the Gordons? Well, that's sort of Oliver Jones's thing. Oliver rang me. So Oliver Jones, folks, if you don't know Oliver Jones, he's
in Vietnam or something now, isn't it?
Hey,
he's still overseas.
He's in Thailand or something.
Thailand,
he's playing gigs. Right. I think he got married. He's got a couple of kids. But Oliver was in Brisbane and worked with a guy called Hayden Bell, and they had a little jingle studio called Excalibur Productions. And I used to sing jingles around Brisbane for TV and radio and stuff. And I met Oliver and Hayden doing jingles. And Oliver's brother's Daniel Jones from Savage Garden. So that was sort of with John Woodruff, sort of. And so Oliver rang me one day and said, I'm putting this band together. It's a bit of a comedy thing. I just want to do this band doing big, dumb rock songs or pop songs. And it's called the Gordons because he thought Gordon was a funny name. And
that's my middle name.
I said, well, you better talk to Tuffy, mate. He just thought it was great. Everybody in the band's he had names like Johnny Gordon, Hester Gordon, I can't remember the other names, but anyway, he had all these songs like I Want to Be an Accountant, Mr. Universe.
What about the one about the roadies? All you can see is their crack or something like that. I remember something
I Want to Be a Roadie. Anyway, it was sort of dumb rock and roll sort of stuff, but some of the songs
but they're really well crafted. Yeah, really well crafted.
Yeah, there's some great songs on there, and we actually won a Sonny Award for one of those songs called Brand New Girl, which is about a blow-up doll that Oliver wrote. And I think actually Oliver and I both wrote it, and we just recorded it. And he must have submitted it for the Sonny Awards and actually won Best Pop Song one year. So it's
sounds to me like it might have been inspiration for Regurgitator's song. But mate, another part of that, the office guy working in the studio was a guy called Greg Colson, who I interviewed a couple of nights ago, who Hot Wheels Harry Hot Wheels, who had a back spine injury playing rugby league, and Greg's a great guy,
Yeah, I met Greg through Oliver and Hayden because he was running their office at
he's great mates with Ollie. Yeah,
out at their studio at where was it, Tanamera.
Right.
So I know Greg.
I got to support my band, and I got to support Savage Garden at the Suncorp Piazza. So before they were doing stadiums or big gigs, we got one that they just had, their songs were just hitting, and Darren and Daniel were there. And remember, my son Harry had just been born, and the guys were sort of meeting the kids and all that stuff, and it was just a great vibe. Yeah, it was one of those things like in Brisbane at that time. It was like the Beatles had returned, and they were doing so well. But the energy for the industry when local acts like that, and the boys were working in a local record shop basically, you know, and they kind of were doing their music and everything else. When a local act like that breaks on the scene and does well, it just invigorates the whole local industry.
Yeah, and I mean, some people don't realize how well they did. I mean, they sold 30 million records.
Brilliant. Yeah.
You know, 15 million of each album, and they were massive. And sorry?
Go.
I just say, and Daniel, I really appreciate the fact that Daniel had the guts to pull the pin when he felt he had enough of the whole thing for whatever reason. It's like you take an act to a certain point, they kind of finished at the top where they were. They didn't just like endure out doing tour after tour into their heyday. They finished where they were. And that was, I don't know the background story, but I think there's a lot of his call. But I really admire the fact that they took it to there. He wanted to move away. You know, Darren went on doing all the stuff he wanted to do beyond that. But they were just a great pop duo. Different time, different era, but to me they reminded me of Air Supply insofar as the fact that they came out with these great songs that hit a really great market that wasn't really expected to come from Australia, but they did it, you know.
And they got a lot of stuff on movies and television shows and stuff. You can hear them all the time. They're good songs. They're
great songs.
You know what I mean?
Great songs.
Yeah, so that makes a big difference.
And Glenn, how much, from your experience, how much did Charles Fisher play in taking them from good songs to what they had worldwide?
Well, if you talk to Charles, he'll tell you it was all him. So,
from someone who worked inside,
Charles is good because I mean they call him the song doctor, and he is in a way because he would make these great suggestions even to me when I was doing my record, and he's going, you know what, you should put a bit there, and you should repeat that, and you go, oh, okay, and everything that I tried that he suggested was a great idea. So I think Charles did a lot for sure. I mean, they started recording in Charles's lounge room in his house in Rose Bay, where I started doing my record, and he just had a 24-track machine in his front room, and they just put it together, and I think he had a lot to do with.
So from your experience, is it fair to say he didn't take over the songs, but he directed the songs the right way as a producer?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the demos were like. I've heard some of the demos through Oliver years ago, but, I mean, obviously those guys are really talented and wrote great songs and had a sort of an idea of what they wanted to do. But I think definitely Charles would have helped to shape the sound of that whole thing. Well,
that's an interesting point, mate. I think one of the things all three of us have experienced is we've had the pleasure, while we've tried to push our own music and develop that, we've also had the pleasure of playing these great songs night after night. And we've tried to take these songs and do them in our own way, our own versions of these cover songs. But that's the thing. It's like, if you can strip a song back to a voice and a guitar or a voice and a piano to its very basics, and it works, to me, that's a sign of a great song. And I think what a producer does beyond that can add to it all, of course. But if you haven't got that basis of a great song at the beginning, you've got nothing. And I think we've had the pleasure in what we do with our careers to actually take songs back to that basic element and then try and take the heart and soul of it and share that with a really intimate audience in our solo gigs.
Yeah, well,
like Sweet Caroline and Live Next Door to Alice.
The Gambler, come on, mate. No, I love getting up there. I love getting up there if I have to play those party songs to get the vibe. I'll do it, but then you bring into the heart of that other songs that, whether it's for me personally, James Taylor or Cat Stevens song or a Cranberry song or something that's left to center, and you just capture people's attention. And you try and take them on that journey. And then now that journey, you bring in some of your music and you just build that bridge of communication between people by using songs. And I've always had this thing, like my goal is always to be, I've had 7 albums out of my own. I've always tried to push my own music, but I've had to make most of my living by playing cover gigs. That's the fact of it. But I think I've done those cover gigs in a way where I've justified those songs by doing my own versions in a pretty unique way. and respecting those songs. And man, that's what Elvis, the Beatles, so many acts did. They take these songs that they haven't written often and well, take the Beatles out in their early days. I'm talking about that, but so many artists use other people's songs and communicate with people. Stones, maybe everyone's done it. And I always get annoyed when people criticize artists who are doing the cover gigs, but man, if that saved me ever having to work in a shoe shop or whatever else, I always made my living out of playing music, learning my craft, and then trying to spin that off into what I've done. And I think all three of us have shared that same experience.
Yeah. Never had to go on the dole. No. Never had to go on the dole.
No, COVID was the closest to that bullshit.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
All of a sudden,
ridiculous,
no work.
mate. And when because you're forced to, that's. I hope I won't go down that rabbit hole tonight because I think we like to keep things positive. But so many, I kind of became a bit of a big mouse in my little echo chamber during that time, and a lot of that was because I saw so many of my friends in the industry were just struggling to keep their heads above water and survive and keep their mind together. And I thought if I just throwed comments out there, hopefully someone would come back and I could call them tomorrow and say, "Hey, you okay?" And we had to do a lot of that during that time. But besides all of that, I think the fact that we've all made our living by playing music is something to be proud of. During that COVID time, as a sensible, mature person, I should have found something else to do. But after doing what I've done, and that's not just life before me, but writing music and working with music and waking up every day thinking about music, I couldn't figure out what else to do. And that was a failure of mine during that time. But at the same time, I'm happy that I've woken up dreaming about music every day instead of having to turn up and do a job for somebody else that I would hated being there.
Yeah,
absolutely. How old are you now, Glenn?
Sorry?
How old are you now?
62.
62, 68, 60?
Yeah, mate.
61 nearly. Yeah.
Yeah, get more than that.
Not looking too bad for a
38.
It's kept us young, It's kept us young at heart too,
I reckon it does, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm still 32. That was the age I got to Brisbane, and I'm still in that mode. My whole mindset hasn't changed one little bit.
Yeah. I got locked at 38. That's right. I wake up feeling 38, but I think the thing is, I had this pleasure of spending a couple of weeks in Beijing with Andy Summers from the Police, and this is going back to 2012. Wow. And Andy, we organised for him to be he was doing a lot of photography. He became the feature of the Beijing Arts Festival. I organised for that to happen. But when we picked him up, we first lunch we had together, I had some Chinese friends with me, and he made the mistake of saying he loved lamb. So every place we went, he got in just like overrun by having lamb dishes. I think he got out of that. But at that lunch, he said he was 73. He was 10 years older than Sting and Stuart Copeland. And he looked like he was about 50. Maybe even left. But as I spent those couple of weeks with him, I realized the reason he looked like he was 50 because he kind of refused to grow up. I mean, he was a highly successful person, but he was like chasing these dreams. He even went to the doctor at one stage. He got bitten by something in Thailand, and we had to take him to the doctor and all that. And with this lovely Chinese female doctor, and in a very cool kind of way, he was like just tuning this doctor so brilliantly. He was like being a lad at 73 that made him look like at that time about 30. But it was just this mental thing where he hadn't grown up. And I heard an interview with him just last week or so, a couple of weeks ago with Rick Beto, and he's still he's in his 80s now, and he still seems like he's like 50 something. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for maintaining a pathway towards a dream. I've had friends who've had their careers, they've done their thing, and they decide to retire, and they seem to get really old. There's something to be said. If you still got to wake up tomorrow and figure out how you're going to survive, how you're going to chase your dream, how you're going to do that, it just puts this mental thing in your personality or your genes, I think, that says, I can't grow old yet. I've got to keep chasing what I'm doing. I think music does that. It inspires that within people.
Oh, yeah. I'm still learning songs every week. I'm still getting out there and just doodling, pick up the guitar, make it up shit, just for the fun of it. You can't help it. It's good.
You do a gig. You do a gig, and suddenly you find out you're putting your voice in a different position, or you're finding this new way to expand your vocal, or then how you use that song in a different way to connect to an audience that you haven't connected with before. There's just these mysteries behind the whole thing.
I saw an interview with Rick Bidmead with Michael McDonald.
I saw it too, mate. How good was it?
Yeah. And I was up there going, she came from somewhere. So I can do that. She will be free. This is bullshit. This is so easy.
But mate, how humble was Michael McDonald about just being a member of the bands he's been in and walking into these situations and falling into things. I mean, he's probably one of the greatest vocalists of our generation. And he's brilliant. It's just brilliant. Yeah.
Have you seen the doco?
I love that bit about, no.
There's a doco on the Doobies, which is quite good. So
really?
Anyway. Yeah.
I love the bit where he's talking about when they do it minute by minute.
And he thought he destroyed the Doobies.
He goes, he's walking around with just the bloody, half naked eating cold pizzas, thinking I've destroyed the band. And so he rings up, it's got a number one. Because someone told him shit house.
But before that, he's saying before that they finished the tour in Japan and they decided to split up. And him and I think it's Pat Simmons or something went to Hawaii, and they were just smoking dope there, and they got the call from the label and their management saying, "What are you guys doing? This album's just gone to number one," and they thought it was a huge failure. You know, there's nothing you can predict about it. You get someone like Michael McDonald, and that was one of the great things when I was working in Cherokee Studios. I mean, we would be working there, and Ice-T was doing an interview in the lounge room with MTV, or Gene Simmons was producing Lita Ford in the studio next door to us, or Rick, what's his name? Crazy Rick. I've forgotten his name now. He got charged actually on some sexual charge thing with his wife. Super Freak. What's his name?
Rick James.
He was recording one of the studios and kept coming in and pinching our beers out of our fridge and all that stuff. But when you're in that environment, or you hear Michael McDonald talking to Rick Beato, it's just people who play music hanging out together. They're not stars. There's not these things. There's not these differences. It's just people being people around music.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a great leveler. Yeah. And I think we've all known people who've become very successful at different levels across the industry. We also know that we could have been there if things had gone the other way. But the fact is we've had the joy of being able to play music all our lives. And I think that's pretty special, you know.
And mate, we're still alive, and we're still breathing, and we're still enjoying life. I've never enjoyed life more than I have right now. We've got grandkids and all that type of stuff. But, you know, I just wake up every morning thinking, geez, how good's this? Yeah. And then I have a fall. And then I get up, and I go, okay, it's okay.
How's the renovations on the RV going, mate?
Okay, no, it's like we're supposed to be finished by next Tuesday, but I reckon it's gonna. Yeah, I went up there the other day. Nothing's been done, and they've had it for nearly a week. And so I don't know. We're going to get out of here. We think we'll go and book up Mooloolaba for another couple of weeks. And get out of here next Tuesday, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But mate, that's the way I am these days. You know, I sort of don't give a fuck. You know,
but mate, you travel around. You travel around a bit and do a lot of corporate functions too, mate. That I've put the banner up there, tuffyworld.com.au. If people want to book you for a private gig or a corporate gig that you love to do, that's the address to get you at, right?
Yeah, that's it. tuffyworld.com.au. Yeah. And you just get, and then Lynn takes after.
You bring the brains into the organisation. They do it, and she deals.
She takes it over, and everything works really smoothly.
So Glenn, what's next for you down Sydney way, mate? What's your plans?
Well, this week, next week, they're both big weeks. I got 5 gigs this week and 5 next week. And I do a lot of Irish pubs as well, and because it's St. Patrick's next weekend, I've got a gig on Saturday doing some Irish stuff. I mean, I know a bunch of it, but I don't know heaps. But anyway, we'll do a few and then we'll stop and we'll do the other stuff. So pretty busy, just doing covers gigs. trying to write some new stuff. I started doing some stuff last year, but and I've sort of recorded another record, and it's nearly finished. I've just got to mix it and pull some things out. But I sort of got stuck, so I stopped doing it about October. And then just writing and recording, wondering what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a studio at home?
Sorry?
You got a studio at home?
Yeah. I'm sitting in it now. Just a few bits of outboard gear and just using Logic, and got a bunch of guitars and some stuff. And if I need real drums, my brother can play and record tracks and stuff. Or I do a lot of production for people, mixing things, and I spent a lot of time doing music workshops around the country with Adam Thompson from Chocolate Starfish. You know the singer?
Yeah.
And he's got a company called Muso Magic, and we spent 17 years doing workshops around Australia, a lot of stuff in India, and a lot of corporate stuff as well. But we started off in Queensland, actually. We used to have a contract with Education Queensland. And what it was like a 2-day program. We'd go to high schools and we'd write songs with the kids and show them how to write songs. We teach them, so they did it. They'd record it. I did the audio production. Adam would facilitate the workshop. And then we do a recording and a video, and then we do a live performance at the end. And we did that for 17 years.
That's cool.
And it was more a team building thing. It wasn't to make people musicians, or it was just to bring people together through the love of music. And it was aimed at risk kids, which means kids that are at risk of leaving school before, leaving school age because of stuff at home or other things. And a lot of those kids were, they turn up the first day and sort of sit there and go, well, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do anything. And they didn't have to, but most of them at the end of the 2 days would come up and say, that was the best 2 days of my life,
Yeah.
And so that was a great thing. I did another one of those just before Christmas last year. We went up to Catherine and out in the communities. We did a lot of Aboriginal communities all around the country as well. So tons of community work, which was great. So we did that.
So is that a government funded thing, or is it?
Initially,
how's it work?
Initially, when we started, it was through Education Queensland. Adam had some contacts, and we used to work in high schools in Queensland. And then we started working with a mob in Melbourne called Red Dust Role Models, who would basically take athletes, famous footy players, basketball players, to the communities, because the kids love basketball and AFL. And that was popular, but once they brought our music thing in, that became the most popular thing of the lot. So we ended up doing millions, lots of communities, not millions, but lots of communities over the last 17 years, and met some amazing people, went to some amazing places, and so I think now it's just he's got sort of contacts in different states, and he does a lot of corporate things as well, but yeah, we just went out to the communities just in October for 2 weeks. That was great.
I think it's a real growth area in that sense. You got a guy, Josh Arnold, up here in around Toowoomba way. I worked with my mate Jason Millhouse and his studio down at Cooperoo. They often go out working with the regional schools and Indigenous community schools. And you got Dan Neeb at Redcliffe, who's put together a whole project that works with disabled and autistic people around music. And that's one of the things I think that is a growth area for the industry, is how music connects to people. I mean, it's music to me, going off a tangent here, it's like the voice of God, insofar as I think we live in an energy vibrational universe, and there's a reason that newborn infants connect to music, and also people in their dementia stages in the old age connect to music. There's something that goes beyond our physical that connects to music, and what's beyond everything else. And I think that's an area that you don't have to be a star in the traditional sense of the industry to shine with your music. I think there's a way music can be used in many ways, and I wish that's something once again that I'm having this big push this big, I'd be a loudmouth quite often about talking about how governments don't look at our industry as they look at something that needs to be propped up all the time through funding and through grants and everything else. Whereas I think our industry should be looked at something that can be a driver of domestic economic spending, domestic spending, and can also be a driver as an export product. We need to be looked at almost like the mining industry, where we can add value to the economy. We don't need to be propped up. And one of those areas we can really add value to the economy, I think, is in that dysfunctional youth area and mental health areas, and how music can help in the health sectors. I think that's an area that we need to be given some serious attention to.
Yeah, no, it's it was a great thing doing that for me. It was just it was really rewarding we did it for a long time, and it's still going on. There's still workshops, and we wrote over the 17 years 1,500 songs. And we work with the Australian Film Team. We work with big corporate groups. We worked in Singapore, in Thailand, we did heaps of stuff in India. We did stuff through Brett Lee's foundation in Mumbai, and also Steve Orr's foundation in Kolkata. It's just another way you can use music to connect with people and do cool stuff. And so over the last probably 20 years, after my record deal fell on a heap, I've just been doing live gigs, covers gigs, some original gigs when I can do them, but and also workshops, and a lot of production at home as well, and still do a bit of graphic design. My wife's a photographer; she does music videos and bits and pieces, and it's all sort of music based, but you sort of veer off and do little different things, which sort of keeps you interested as well.
I think that's like any other small business, where at the end of the day we're sole traders, or we run a small business, and every small business has to have 3 or 4 or 5 different streams of income coming in. And obviously through COVID, the problem was we had our main form of income ripped out from under our feet. But that's one of the things we have to develop moving forward is, the models changed. Growing up in the 80s, 90s, I was able to do my gigs. I was able to sell merchandise. So I could sell CDs, and selling CDs and then getting, publishing returns from APRA were a very significant part of my income. With streaming, I got a thing through the other day for my, I don't know, quarterly or 6 monthly, whatever thing from APRA, and I had $1.49 was my income from streaming. Whereas back in the day, I could probably sell over that time 1,000 CDs at $20 a head and get 20 grand to supplement my income. What's your thoughts on where we are now, and what changes are going to happen, or for a new generation coming through, mate? Where do you see we're at?
From what I can, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm just going. Yeah, go for it.
From what I can see, I don't know, but people I've spoken to, there's a lot more opportunity. Well, a lot more people are trying to get what they call sync opportunities, getting your music and TV and films and stuff, and on the streaming platforms like Netflix and Stan and all that other thing. Get your song.
So, Glenn, sorry, mate, while you've pointed that out, I just wanted to throw in a thing here. One of my arguments up here has been that the Queensland government has done a very good job at putting incentives in place for films to be produced and created at the Gold Coast. What's happened there? Why can't they go a step further then and actually add a few added incentives if those film productions use 2, 3, 5% of Queensland music content in their projects? So I think that's one area of expansion. And sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to, that was a perfect platform for me to say.
Good idea.
I think that's an area of growth for us,
Yep. No, that's a great idea. I mean, you've got to give every opportunity to, local artists in the area where you're talking about to get in there, because
from that put together an education thing which shows artists how they can work in with those type of projects. I mean, my early days in the 90s in Los Angeles, I was fortunate to my first producer of my first singles was a guy called Adam Smalley, and Adam is a music editor who's done a lot of Spielberg movies, but his dad was a guy called Jack Smalley, who was an orchestrator for Last of the Mohicans and various other TV shows in America.
Yeah.
And they just knew how to work in with the film industry because they grew up in Los Angeles. That's maybe something we need to be teaching here, is like, instead of pouring money into a grant that goes nowhere or just goes into a project that goes overseas, how do we put that into something that shows local musicians how they can be more proactive in working with the film industry? And you don't have to be an orchestrator. You don't have to know all the ins and outs, but your skills of writing songs can flow into that film industry, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, you see a lot of stuff on Netflix or whatever series, and there's some really interesting music in all these shows, you know, that you've never heard of before, but it's good because you've never heard it. So, you know, and I always try and find out who it is and use the old, what's that, Shazam app to see who the music is and stuff. Shazam, mate. And but yeah, that's a great idea. And you know, if you can, like you said, if you can give those people incentives to use local content, instead of buying in the, you know, I want to stick this big famous song in. And I mean, once again, you know, it's their art, so you can let them do what they want to do. But if you can promote using local artists, or, you know.
But man, I watched a movie. I've watched it twice the last couple of days. Actually, a movie called Dog, which is about this army dog in America. But the top and tail end of the music, there's great music in the whole movie. But Chris Stapleton does the top and tail end songs, and I love Chris Stapleton's stuff.
Yeah.
But mate, the songs he had in there were nothing that Nik or Glenn or Tuffy couldn't be writing if it was a production out here, or other musicians I know couldn't be writing. Yeah. And we're good at what we do. So we would just love some support in getting into those areas, I believe.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I heard, well, sorry, mate.
Go.
Go on. Yeah,
go, Tuff.
Go.
There you go, Tuff.
No, I've been watching Blacklist, and all of a sudden Wolfbutler comes on in one part of that. Oh, there you go, like a little Brizzy act in there, buddy. What's the money like in that stuff? How's that work? Does that just get a one-off payment for it, or they get a...
I think
it's changed, but Glenn can explain that best.
I think it's funny because I'm actually talking to a guy in Los Angeles at the moment who's recorded a couple of songs that I wrote with my friend Kerry Buchanan. And we had a band. You remember Kerry Buchanan, Tuffy, drummer?
Yeah.
Drummer? Yeah.
Yeah.
For many years.
So who did he play with?
I met him up there. Sorry?
Was he with Dragon?
He has played with Dragon, and he played with Marsha Hines for years. He played with Tina Arena.
That's right. Yeah.
Margaret Ehrlich. Anyway, I met him in Brisbane, and then he moved to Sydney, and I moved back to Sydney, and then we caught up again, and we started a band called Kerosene, and we did this album, and which looks like that.
I've sold all my albums. I've got nothing left. I've actually run out of my CDs.
And I took that picture on the cover actually out near the community. So
all right.
Anyway, cool. So we wrote an album that in about 2008, I think it was, and we did this record, and it's a great record. But once again, we did 4 or 5 gigs, and we couldn't afford to keep paying the players. And anyway, there's a guy that I met I didn't meet him in LA years ago. John Woodruff put me together with this girl called Michelle Smith from Melbourne, and this guy is her husband, Eddie, and I wrote with her years ago. Nothing happened with the songs, but she moved to LA. They got married. They got kids. She texted me out of the blue and said, "Can we use this song we wrote? Because my husband Eddie wants to record it." Blah blah blah. I said, "Sure." And so he's ended up recording 2 of our songs, Kerry and myself, our songs off the Kerosene record, and he's just released his first single, which is a bit of a reggae sort of Jack Johnson sort of vibe, called his name is Eddie Witz, Witz. His name's Eddie Horowitz, but he calls himself Eddie Witz. And it's a bit of a Jack Johnson, that sort of Ben Harper sort of vibe. This song's called My Island, and it's out at the moment. I think it's getting a bit of streaming and stuff. But he's recorded these 2 other songs of ours, and he's putting an EP out. And he's talking to us saying he's got a lot of supposedly sync opportunities because he lives in LA. He's got a marketing company. I think he's quite successful. And so he's got a lot of contacts. So we're just hoping that he can maybe do something with these songs and get them into some of these shows. But we're just in the the moment negotiating with him about the splits with the publishing and all that sort of stuff. So
I just had a cool idea.
Yeah,
Glenn, do you know Mike Flanders?
I know the name, Mike Flanders.
Mix produced a lot of my albums, and he's been over in Nashville for quite a while now.
Right.
And he ran a publishing company over there, and he's got his head around how publishing works over there. I reckon it'd be cool if we set up a four-way chat between us three and Mick to talk about what's happening in Nashville, even down to one of the things that, here in Australia, we have nothing set up where musicians get super, or we get, we have no plan. We get our money in randomly and all this stuff. The studio system in America is very cool, where they get paid through a central organization that looks after all those extra things. And I'd love to see that happen for our young musicians coming through here. But talking about that and how that then networks into publishing groups, and in America, music lawyers and attorneys play a big part between the artists, the publishers, the record labels, and everything else. So that could be a good chat between the four of us. So I just want to throw that out there. If you're interested, we should get Nick online and have a chat about what's happening in Nashville in the States and what ideas we could bring into Australia.
Yeah.
Back to you, mate. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no. And what you asked originally, Tuffy, was what sort of money, or how do they pay for that? From what I understand from Eddie, there's usually just like a buyout fee. So if they say, hey, we love this song, we want to use it in our new Netflix series, obviously depending on what their budget is or what they can get it for from you, there's usually a fee that they'll say, look, we'll give you, I don't know, depending who the artist is, but if it's, we'll give you $5,000, we'll give you $10,000, we'll give you $20,000. And that allows them to use that for the use of their series. And I think on top of that, you'd get some sort of publishing royalties as well as the buyout fee. But the buyout fee is for whoever owns the recording. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment, is negotiate, because it's all very well saying, hey, I can get your song in a Netflix show, we'll get some great sync things, but unless you've got a contract with that guy saying, well, if you get a buyout figure of $20,000, we want a third each, I mean, you've still got to get paid for it, because he would own the recording because he's done a new recording of this song of ours. And it's great you're getting it in a show, but if we haven't got a thing in place with him saying we want a part of whatever you get, then we get nothing. You know what I mean?
Glenn, it was really interesting. It was really interesting. I had a 10-year journey in China where I without going into details, I accidentally ended up over there, but I had a song go number 3 on their national charts and became entwined and exposed to how their government and media landscape works. When I first went over there in 2006-07, everything about the industry was government subsidized. It was all like festivals, everything, and they were pretty lame because they were all just government money. And they had a position at that time that you couldn't sell a CD in China properly because there were all these copies being made. And the reason the copies were being made was the government looked at it that you got paid for your work at the recording stage. So if you record a song, you get paid for that. Then that becomes public property, and that's a commercial item beyond that. So you don't get anything else. When it came to 2011-12, the new government coming in, one of the things they wanted to do was actually boost their economy, and particularly the rural sector, which had been left behind and been kept in the poor, and they wanted to raise them into the middle class. Now, to do that, they had to literally expand access to commercialization across the country. You couldn't do that by building things everywhere. So they spent a lot of money and energy in investing and developing their internet access. So if you were living in the far reaches of China, you suddenly had access to be able to buy within 1 day of delivery the same items you can buy in Beijing. And one of the drivers of that economy was the digital content market, of which music played a major role. So you had all these artists who for so long had been paid through, like they'd get sponsored by a mining company in China as a government sponsorship, and they would get their wage through that mining company. They'd make recordings, they get paid through performances, but they were paid through that system. Suddenly, a lot of these people were empowered to be their own record labels, to be own their own content, and to have value within their content. And they're actually made a lot of independent artists very, very successful in China. And that's a little bit of the model I think we need to look at here. how do we empower? Yeah, you've got the government at the moment going into fight against Facebook and Meta about the news content. They're saying, okay, Mark Zuckerberg said that they're not going to pay for news content. So the government's fighting to support those news services who they need to help them win the next election. So they support them. Where's the government fighting for creative artists in the music sector to get better rights through Spotify and all these other streaming services to make money from the content that we make? And why should they be doing that? Because I saw a successful model in China where that helped build the digital economy of content became one of the 5 pillars of the Chinese economic platform. We could make our digital content of music and other digital content a major pillar of the Australian economy if we put a focus on it. And I think that's a shift we need to move through somehow. We just need to centralize the power base of all the musicians, all the people who work in the gig economy, who work in restaurants, who work in all these things, all these people that got abused through the whole COVID thing. We need to find some way to centralize our power so that our power base can become a major force at elections. And if we can do that, we need to change the opinion of how our industry is looked at so that us creators can get a better deal in making money by adding power and strength to the economy. So sorry, I go my little rants like this every now and then, mate. So you have to forgive me for that. But it's like, I think us guys, we're elders in the industry. We need to have discussions around how we make it better for the next generation coming through and how we fight for the things we love and the things that we lost. I mean, we all have been successful in certain degrees, but we should have been more successful. And, I think a lot of that comes down to a lack of structure
around our
industry model.
We should be rich.
Hey?
We should be filthy rotten rich.
Absolutely. We should be living the life of Riley.
We should be.
Should be living the life of Riley, driving around in RVs to every luxury place in the country.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's not that bad. And if they think about it, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but guys, what do you think? What do you think as guys who've been around the industry? What could we be doing to make it better?
Oh, mate, if you get the pub scene going again, the pub scene is terrible. So you need to get basics, people getting back into music. I mean, I went out Sunday to had a look around the valley, and they had on the kickboxing and all the MEB, the thing.
UFC.
And they're just sitting around like this. Just sitting around like this, watching it. The bar is completely. There's no fun in the industry anymore. People and it's all the mobile phones, everything. The attention used to be on the stage. Now you got the bloody I'm playing there Friday night footy. You just can't get it. And people are getting talking about is getting the people coming to gigs in backyard parties where they pay a certain fee. The cost to go.
Tuffy, mate, say that again. Mate, say that again. Say that again. You froze for a while. Can you just go over that about the backyard parties? You froze?
Oh, froze.
Just repeat what you said, mate.
Okay then. Okay. All right. What we're talking about was people have come to gigs. Like me and Nik have got a really big following in the 40s plus market from Mooloolaba particularly. But we did a gig at the Osborne for New Year's Eve, and it was one of the biggest gigs I've played at. It was as far as going on. So there's a market there for people who want to experience that sort of thing because you're just not getting in the pubs now. The pubs are just so boring. They're just the most boring place you ever be. That's why I hardly play it. And when we got that going, and the people are, excuse me for my language, all the people out there. But the greatest compliment I ever got at a gig was, "You're okay." It's seen better. But every time I go to your gig, I fall asleep. That was the greatest compliment I've ever had. Nothing to do with my music or anything else. And that was the gig. That was my job. That's what I did. You know, like you had heaps of girls and they went out with that purpose of turning up the gig. You know, they're going to have a good time. And if there's heaps of girls, it's going to be good. I counted 32 blokes and 3 girls watching the MMA, whatever it's called. Mixed martial arts, MMA. Watching that. And not one person, I was talking to the duty manager for about 20 minutes, and not one person went up to the bar. You know. Yeah. So the fun's gone out of it. So what we want to do is take it back. Now, you imagine me and Nik playing together individually to your old crowd. All they're going to do is go to the bottle shop. And I used to say to pubs like Steve, well, what's the difference? What's people going to get here? What's your business today? Okay, everyone's got service. So everyone's putting on the footy. Everyone's putting on the MMA. You've got to be the unique place. I mean, I want to have a place where they're putting up the Three Stooges on the big screen and just great music play, and that's sort of vibe. Well, Nik knows the story at the Normby. They had when I first started to play. The Normby end up. I don't know if you know what happened at Normby. I've only got 10% of Bachelor League 2 boys. Just let you know. They used to have the footy playing on the screen, and I got. I said, what's, you know, and everyone was up the back, and you got a few blokes standing up the front looking at the game, you know, you get a little past. So we got 2 backpackers who were friends of my daughters, were photographers, and we ended up taking photos of all the girls in the place in real time and putting it back up, putting that on the big screen. And next thing, it was all girls up the front and going off, and the place took off. It ended up being one of the biggest Sundays that's ever happened, you know. There's little things like that. You put the personality back into the room, and that's what's missing. It's missing in everything, mate. It doesn't matter where you go. You know, everything's boring. It's all boring. You walk along the street, people just look at their iPhones. They're walking along, you know. Okay, what the hell happened? Where'd the fun go?
I mean, I've been to
anyway,
pubs,
that's my rant.
I agree. I think the pubs are boring, and they've got all the football and all the sports and all that bullshit, which, look, I'm not into that. I know a lot of people are, obviously, but you get to gigs, and a manager came up to me at this pub out near Penrith, 6 months ago, and it was a Thursday night, and I'm playing up one end in the bistro area, and right down the other end is the sports bar. It's a brand new pub, and it's ugly, horrible place. Anyway, the manager came up and said, "Oh, what time are you finishing?" And I said, "Well, you're the manager, don't you know? It's 9 o'clock." And he said, "Oh, the football's on at 8."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, do you want me to go?" Well, he said, "Oh, I don't know." And this is the manager, right? And I said, "Well, mate, if you want me to pack up, I'll go. It's fine, whatever, you know." "Oh, I don't know." And then he just wandered off, and I just kept playing, and then packed up at 9. But, you know, things like that. You know, I played this pub at Bondi, and it's an Irish bar, and it's sort of brand new, and it's a sports bar basically. The huge screens everywhere on 3 walls, and they set you up in the corner, and you turn over there, and there's a big greyhound, and you turn over, and you're just thinking, fuck am I doing this shit for?
Mate, well, I just say to them,
and then they wonder why people don't come to see music, you know.
Well, I as far as the actual playing time goes, I say to them, look, the important thing for your venue is people are here drinking, having a good time. If that means they need to watch footy, I'll stand aside, let them watch the footy. I'm not going to play over that and annoy their footy watching. But he's still paying me the same because, mate, I could have been booked elsewhere. And I'm here for this time. So you pay me for my time, whether I'm playing or not. You know, it's not about whether I play. It's about whether we keep people happy drinking in the bar. Yeah. And if that's part of the whole thing, if I've got to play 15 minutes at the end, I'll pay that. But you still pay me for a full gig because I'm here. I could have been working elsewhere.
And they don't know how to set it up. Like I remember Tuffy
told me.
You said to me, Tuffy, you said, "Mate, when you walk in the venue, you've got to see the music straight away, you know?"
Yeah.
And they stick you in a corner, they stick you behind a big screen, they stick you here, and then they go, "Oh, are you playing tonight? I didn't know." The manager says
that. Yeah, exactly.
They have it every week, but he didn't know,
Yeah.
So,
or punters call, people who know you call up and say, what time does Nik start? And they're like, who's Nik? What's happening? They have no idea. But man, that's the difference between back in those days. Well, they had to work. They had to work with us.
Getting those words.
Well, they had to work with us back in those days because that was about bringing people in the bar. Once it became about pokies and restaurants and everything else, the bars lost that whole thing. But we have to go back to finding a reason to put bums on seats. End of the day, we can't sit here bitching about how bad pubs are. We've got to find a reason to put bums on seats. And look, with my 70 show, I'm trying to come up with something that will put some bums on seats. What Tuffy and I are doing, we're trying to tap into that memory lane thing to bring people out, have a good time.
This is the backyard thing, Nik. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Tuffy's been talking. We've been working on how do we put together backyard gigs.
Another little story.
Go, mate, go.
Yeah, do you want me to talk, Nik?
Yeah, go.
Stop. I thought you're halfway through what you're going to say.
We've got a bit of a delay, which just cuts in on each other.
And I'm just about to run out of battery too. But can you hear me now properly?
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Anyway, basically, what it costs you to go to a pub these days is just so damn expensive. That's the biggest killer. And if they're going to go out, it's got to be great. It can't be like a pub. It's got to be great. And I was talking to Trump and you blew in the face. But a classic example was, I was saying all this to Trump. I was in Darwin, had a bar called the Tap Bar in Darwin. And they didn't have
Tuffy, mate.
TV,
Tough.
No music, nothing,
Tough.
But it was packed till about 10. And then they got...
Tuffy, hold your microphone a bit closer. We're losing your vocal, mate. Hold your microphone closer, like you're more stable.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I dropped it down.
Thank you.
Sorry, okay. They have a bar called the Tap Bar. Is that better?
Yep.
Everyone's breaking up. It's all over the place. Yeah. I think it's, I don't know if that feed's going. It's going on the feed. Can you hear me okay? Give us a thumbs up if you can hear me all right. No thumbs up. Okay. I think we're out. I think that's it. You're both frozen.
No, you're good, mate. We can hear you.
I got a thumb eventually for Glenn. Yeah. All right. I reckon we should end it, mate. It's going haywire.
Okay. Yeah, we've lost your signal's going a bit crazy there, mate.
Anyone can talk?
Yeah. Glenn, mate, I think we should do this, if you don't mind, in a number of weeks' times again.
Sure.
And Tuff, thanks for tapping in here. Folks, a few things I want to promote. One is that I've got my show coming up at Hotel Metropole on the 13th of April. It's my 70s Unplugged show. Please message me for tickets for that. Tuffy and I are going to be at the full moon on the last Saturday of this month, Easter Saturday. We kick off at 8 o'clock. Glenn, for anyone who's watching down Sydney, hopefully we get some. But mate, anything you want to plug you're doing?
No, I'm just doing my usual gigs. I'm doing tomorrow night in the city at a place called the Three Wise Monkeys in Sydney, folks. Thursday at Scruffy Murphy's, Friday at NBC Sports Club, Saturday NBC Sports Club, Sunday at the DY Bowling Club.
and seeing as Tuffy's internet is freezing and carrying on a bit, I'd like to promote the fact that he does do like private parties for divorcees and all that stuff like that. And we are happy to prostitute him out for anything that makes money for Glenn and I. We will manage that situation.
That's for especially divorce parties.
Your internet is working suddenly. There we go.
All right, guys.
Great to talk to you, brothers. Thank you very much.
It's all over the place.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, hopefully a few people see this thing and we'll keep powering on what we're doing. But God bless,
see you, mate.
God bless our music industry, and we'll keep doing what we do. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Tuff. See you later. Love you guys. Bye.
See you, mate.
See you, mate. Bye.
See ya. There you go.
Well done.